Good morning. We are going to begin. Please stand with number 40, The Morning Hangs a Signal. Happy New Year.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane. Glad to have all of you, where we join together to create a nourishing liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or as we say in short, what do we say in short now? Create community, find meaning, and live justly. Some people say work for justice. I'll tell you what. You can say it whichever way you want to.
No rules here.
No rules here. Because it's going to make sense to us. Yeah, now if it's one of those things where everybody says something different, that might sound a little strange, but we'll give you those two choices. So you can either work for justice or live justly. Or both. Want to try it? Or, in short, to create community, find meaning, and live justly. Great. I liked it. Good. Truly a Unitarian experience. Truly. Well, also, welcome to each and every one of you. We're so glad to have you here today, as always, and begin, as always, by embracing all that you bring with you, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, your differences, everything that helps make you who you are is welcome here today. So glad to have all of you. I do want to begin, as has been happening way too often recently, with noting that our unity candle is alit at the front of our sanctuary this morning, indicating that one of our members has passed. Usually we do this when they pass during the week, but this has been about 3 weeks now, but it happened after I was last in the pulpit, and I wanted to be able to say something this morning. So I'm talking about Carroll Street. I don't know how many remember Carroll. Probably more people remember Charlotte Street and Clay Evans, longtime members here who retired a few years ago and went up to this just terribly ugly place called Whitefish, Montana, where they're living on a beautiful lake. Anyway, Carol and Charlotte were sisters, and Charlotte was a member of our church, and Carol was a member of our church as well, although she didn't come as often and wasn't as well known. I knew her, and she was just like Charlotte, one of the kindest, friendliest souls in the church, and I miss her. She was a beautiful person. You might have read some about it in the paper. She had a heart attack a few weeks ago, but there was some misreporting about her dog being involved in her death, which wasn't the case, but caused a lot of extra suffering for Charlotte and their family, trying to figure out what the heck happened. So it came as a bit of a relief that it was a heart attack, and her death was quick and hopefully painless. But yeah, so that was Carol, and I'm going to miss her not popping in now and then and giving me one of her big bear hugs. So our hearts go out to Charlotte and Cly and the rest of their family, who I know are grieving Carol's sudden loss, especially grieving it. And we are going to keep our candle lit here throughout our service this morning in Carol's honor. Okay, I also want to take the opportunity to wish you a Happy New Year. I know today is New Year's Eve, so the last day of what's been a difficult year in many ways. And hopefully the new year ahead is as promising as it should be for us. So I also want to welcome our Zoom attendees. See, thought I'll put them back up on the screen for us, and we'll get a chance to say hello. See who's joining us for Wow, there were only 2 people there when I checked about 10 minutes ago. You guys are like tribbles, man. You keep multiplying. Good to see everybody. Who is...
Not quite, Todd.
Not quite tribbles, yeah. Well, it's always great to have you, whether you're few in number or there's many of you. Happy New Year to all of you. How's everybody doing?
Well, Todd, at the moment, there are 13 of us, and the number may be growing here. I think that most are regulars. I haven't seen anyone else that's first timers yet. So I'm sure we all want to wish everybody a Happy New Year and hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much, and same to you. And we were delighted that Joyce and Nils came all the way over from Port Townsend for our Cosmic Advent service. I have to say, it was quite bizarre. As I was seeing them in person for the first 2 seconds, I didn't quite know where I was. But it was just great to have, and such an honor and pleasure to have you join us in person. It's great to have all of you by Zoom, so there's no requirement or second-class status because you attend via Zoom. By any means, we're grateful to have you with us, but it was a delight to actually be able to give you both a hug in person, so thanks so much for that. All right, well, we're going to take a couple of extra minutes here this morning to greet one another, whether you are here in person or you're Zooming, or if you're watching us via our stream. It's always great to have you as well. You can shoot somebody a text and let them know you're thinking about them. Please. Heidi. All right, and always more opportunity to visit with one another following our service. By the way, that was, I hated to interrupt that. It's a small group, but you were really getting into the conversation and the visiting, so sorry to interrupt, but you get to continue again after service. But we are going to move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
The opening words today are from a part of a conversation of a book with writer Douglas Adams interviewing Jane Goodall. And the title of the book, appropriately, is called The Book of Hope. In the conversations that took place in Jane Goodall's compound in Africa, she defined hope as what enables us to keep going in the face of adversity. It is what we desire to happen, but we must be prepared to work hard to make it happen. Abrams then asked Jane, are hope and faith the same? Hope and faith are very different. Faith is when you actually believe that there is an intellectual, intelligent power behind the universe, which can be translated into God or Allah or something like that. We can believe in life after death or some other doctrine, but we can't know. But we can know the direction we want to go, and we can hope it is the right direction. Hope is more humble than faith, since no one can know the future. Hope is not an emotion, it is not a skill, it is an aspect of our survival. It is a human survival trait, and without it, we perish.
Please stand. Join me for number 1031, Filled with Loving Kindness, in your teal hymnal. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May
Right, we are now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning. And we're going to begin today, as we have been, on behalf of the people of Ukraine, the people of Israel, the Palestinians who are being impacted by the terrible violence. I say that every week, but the words always seem lacking somehow to describe what's going on. But we keep all of that suffering before us as citizens of the world, as members of the human family. We also kindle a candle this morning for church members Tanya and Kurt Workmaster, who again are suffering from terrible health issues. And we take a moment of silence as usual on behalf of others that you might be thinking of, and you'd be welcome to name them aloud at this time if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world.
Good morning. Good morning. Our story for all ages this morning is inspired by a book written by Becky Ray McCain. I want to tell you a story about being new and how sometimes it's fun and sometimes it isn't. Once there was a second grader named Paul. In January, he moved to a new town and had a new teacher and a new class and a brand new desk. There was a boy sitting across from him with bright red hair, and his name was Ryan. He told Paul a knock-knock joke, and he was really funny. So the first day was a good day. The second day, 3 other boys came up to Ryan, and he thought, "Oh, great, they want to make friends with me too." But that isn't what happened. They came up and started poking Paul, and even calling him names. He looked at his friend Ryan. Ryan really didn't want to hear what was going on. So what do you think he did? What would you do if you didn't want to hear something that was going on? This is what he did. That second day wasn't such a good day. But the next day was even worse because the 3 boys came up to Paul at lunchtime and they stole his lunch. He didn't have anything to eat. The next day, Paul didn't come to school at all. The 3 boys were cheering that day because Paul wasn't there. And then, even though he didn't want to, Ryan heard them planning mean things that they were going to do to Paul when he came back. But this time he didn't stick his finger in his ears. What do you think he did instead? Exactly. He stood up for his new friend by telling his teacher. So when Paul came back to school and there was recess, the 3 boys came around. But then the teacher came around too. And Ryan said, "Come on and play with me." And that day was the best day of all, because that day, Paul and Ryan became best friends. And so my hope for all of you this year is that when you hear something you'd rather not hear, that you don't stick your fingers in your ears. I hope that when you hear or see something that needs your help, that this year you find a way to support those who need you. Thank you.
Now is the time in our service for contemplation in silence. Get comfortable. Relax into your breathing and go into this still place within. Consider these words by Joyce Sequicci Hiffler from her book, A Cherokee Feast of Days. If, like a Cherokee warrior, I can look at the new year as an opportunity to stand on new ground, then strength and courage are on my side. If I had waited a long time for everything to be perfect, and there have been moments for everything to be perfect, but they didn't fill my expectations, then I can face challenges. I will remember that things do work out, bodies do heal, relationships mend, not because I said it, but because I believe it. It is time to make things right, to stay on the path. As water runs fresh and free from the woodland spring, so new life and meaning will bubble up from my own inner source. I will still be steady because there's nothing to be gained by showing fear in this chaotic world. I can turn from ignorance and prejudice toward a light that never goes out. The death of fear is in doing what you fear to do. Sequicci coming dear.
Maybe it's just too early in the game. Oh, but I thought I'd ask you just the same. What are you doing New Year's Eve? Wonder whose arms will hold you good and tight when it's exactly 12 o'clock that night, welcoming in the New Year's Eve. Maybe I'm crazy to suppose I'd ever be the one you chose out of the 1,000 invitations you'll receive. question in advance. What are you doing New Year's? New Year's Eve. Maybe I'm crazy to suppose I'd ever be the one you chose. Out of the 1,000 invitations you'll receive, but in case I stand one little chance, here comes the jackpot question in advance. What are you doing New Year's? New Year's Eve. Oh, what are you doing New Year's? Oh, New Year's Eve.
Thank you so much, Madeline. And Maura, thank you. I was talking with some of the folks on Zoom before the service started, and I noted that I used to get to steal the show most Sundays, but now it's Madeline. And I'm very happy that you do. So it's just that I have to follow that with this crummy sermon. So this is a sermon entitled "The Discovery of Humanity," which probably seems like I'm going to be going back really far in time, but I'm not. Actually not going to be going back more than a couple of hundred years, really. A few hundred. But I begin by mentioning that in The Coddling of the American Mind, authors Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt begin by outlining the three great untruths that they believe have in recent years become widespread. And you can read the book if you want to know all three. But today I want to focus on just one: the untruth of us versus them. Life is a battle between good people and evil people. Great untruth. Us versus them. Life is a battle between good people and evil people. Remarkably, no matter which side we're on, we all think we're on the good side, which makes those on the other side the evil people. In ancient times, this instinctive mistrust of others, of outsiders, of strangers, may have genuinely protected small clans and tribes from dangerous people. But as the numbers in human societies grew and diversified, the tribal mistrust shifted to ideological differences. Mistrust of ideological differences. There existed good ideas and evil ideas. And we always think that ours are the good ideas, which makes those that aren't ours the evil ideas. To be clear, I'm not talking about the practical nature of ideas, which does make some better than others, but about the feelings of moral righteousness that often accompany our beliefs and moral disdain toward the ideas of others. These sentiments can lead to ridiculous upset, even among friends and family, over trivial disagreements. You may have had some of those this holiday. And they can lead to brutal persecutions and bloody wars as they have throughout human history and continue to do today. Now, here's how I believe that we come to moralize our opinions and beliefs. Like most creatures, our first instinct is toward safety. As cognitive therapist Paul Gilbert says, the most important question faced every day by all animals, including humans, is whether their immediate environment is dangerous or not. The first thing we want to do is feel safe. To feel safe, we rely upon our instincts to tell us what to do next. We rely upon our instincts to tell us what to do next. Stay put, proceed with caution, run like hell, or fight like the devil. And like all creatures, we are creatures of habit, so we tend to feel safer by repeating the behaviors that have so far kept us safe. We're conservative in our behavior, that is. And this is why certain behaviors come to define certain creatures. Dogs bark, spiders make webs, owls hunt at night, and so on. Those were behaviors that forged creatures through repetition. And because our particular species is a thinking species, our feelings are often expressed as ideas. It is not safe to get off the trusted path. We might think to ourselves and say to others, right? The instinct is, don't do something different than I did before, don't go a different way. The thought is, it's not safe to go off the beaten path. So the first thing that we do when we hear a new idea is to determine if it makes us feel safe or not. As habitual creatures, we are habitual thinkers, which means we instinctively prefer our traditional beliefs and are fearful of new ideas. And because we are social creatures and instinctively want to keep those we care about safe, especially our own offspring, we teach and pass on our old ideas. Don't stray from the path. Don't talk to strangers. Look both ways before crossing the street. We then come to consider our subjective feelings, translated into thoughts that are often expressed as rules to live by, to be objective truths. Not rooted in our subjective instincts, but as objective truths. And because we think they are objectively true, we believe that they ought to be held and observed by everyone. Those who don't observe them are considered evil because they have ideas that can lead to danger. Hence, we have reached the point of moralizing our beliefs and feeling morally justified, righteous, about imposing them on others through culture, through education, through discipline, reward, and punishment. Don't stray from the path becomes don't stray from the one true path. These once rules of thumb become our laws and dogmas that get written on decrees and etched in stone, which is another attempt to make them objective realities that exist outside of our subjective thoughts and feelings. In short, what begins as a subjective feeling and personal opinion becomes projected outward as objective truth, and then is moralized. That's the pattern. Subjective, objectify, moralize. Which justifies us forcing our ideas on others, whether they agree or disagree with us. Our ideas are not only right, but righteous. or so we think. And because we are wedded to our ideas and beliefs, because of instinctive and unconscious drives, we hold them to be true before we have any good reasons for doing so. Right? Most of the time we think we have good reasons and then we have our ideas. But it's the opposite, generally. The feelings are articulated as a thought and then we find reasons to justify it. They initially emerge for psychological reasons, not logical reasons. This is why we turn them into laws and doctrines which are forbidden to break or openly disagree with without severe repercussions, because many of our beliefs are rooted in nonsense that cannot be rationally justified. Why? Because I said so. In their new book, The Canceling of the American Mind, Greg Lukianoff and his new co-author, Ricky Schlott, argue that our widespread commitment to the great untruth of us versus them has become greatly exacerbated today because of the failure of academia and the recent advent of social media, resulting in what is often referred to as cancel culture. Now, this term refers to intolerant college students and graduates who use social media to collectively demonize, dehumanize those they disagree with or who disagree with them in an effort to ruin their reputations and get them fired from their jobs. Over the past several decades, they write, many of the institutions tasked with teaching us how to argue productively have failed in their duties, most notably American higher education. They go on to say, and just as higher education began to fail in that mission, an epical technological shift took place that shook the foundations of society and made everything worse. Personal attacks, dismissive cliches, and an ever-growing body of taboos abound, in virtual discourse. Rules of arguing that bring society closer to the truth are pushed to the wayside in favor of techniques that let you off the hook from actually engaging with your opponents. These destructive methods of argumentation caught on like wildfire for a simple reason. They help people assert moral superiority and win arguments by simply shutting down the other side. Kind of medieval, isn't it? Lukianoff and Schlott also remind us that a similar period of social disruption happened nearly 6 centuries ago after the invention of another disruptive communication technology, the printing press. Led, they say, to the cataclysmic changes in Europe, religious conflict, an expansion of the witch trials, and revolutionary civil strife. Some of this strife was caused by the authorities struggling to put the genie back in the bottle, but lots of ordinary people also felt threatened and hostile to those expressing new ideas, just as those who expressed them felt hostile towards those with old ideas and those with other new ideas. But it wasn't all bad. Literacy rates nearly doubled in Western Europe between the 1450s and 1650s. I shouldn't say nearly, more than doubled. And have been increasingly doing so globally ever since. Again, as Lukianoff and Schlott say, thanks to hindsight, we know the result of these growing pains would eventually be a flowering of science, art, and reform. We knew the growing pains would eventually be a flowering of science, art, and reform. They are speaking, of course, of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment periods that soon followed the printing press and the widespread distribution of differing ideas that it created. One of the most important new ideas emerging from this tumultuous era was the discovery of humanity. That might at first seem a perplexing statement. How could human beings not already have known about the existence of humanity? Surely they recognized that other people were also people. But they didn't understand that all people share in a common humanity, that there is something about each of us that is the same, that makes us related. They held to the untruth of us versus them. They were still tribal in their mindset, connected to others not because of their common humanity, but because of their common king, or their common kingdom, or their common religion, or their common ideas and decrees and dogmas. But nothing so universal as a belief that all human beings are fundamentally the same, regardless of our many individual and cultural differences. That didn't exist. Sadly, the printing press initially only made things worse. Bringing more voices into the public sphere only increased intolerance and the brutal and unjust lengths to which people would go to suppress them. The authorities pointlessly and violently struggled to regain control of the conversation, even as millions of others tried to force their own ideological tribe's righteous ideas onto everyone else. And this was the turbulent atmosphere out of which the Enlightenment arose and had to arise in response. With more literacy, more voices, and more ideas came more social intolerance, suppression, and hostility. See how we handled it earlier, right? Are we going to say live justly or work for justice? Right? A lot of churches would argue themselves out of existence over something like that. We'd have two sides. Instead, we just say, hey, say what you want. Right? It's a great example. Until that point, Christianity had only one major dispute in its history, leading to the Great Schism of 1054 CE and to the establishment of the Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox churches. But between the invention of the printing press and the end of the Enlightenment period, several other denominations emerged. Lutherans, Calvinists, Anglicans, Anabaptists, Mennonites, Hutterites, Amish, Baptists, Methodists, Unitarians, Universalists, and countless splint-off groups that still can't all be listed. Each with its own specific belief about what Christianity is supposed to mean. All of which led to religious wars and persecutions that made this one of the darkest periods in human history. There can be little wonder why some Enlightenment thinkers began calling for tolerance. Another unknown concept at the time, which meant at the very least, live and let live. It meant stop killing each other over our beliefs. It's the least we can do. Don't have to agree with each other, but let's not kill each other over our ideas. As philosopher Suman Neiman writes, the Enlightenment emerged from a blasted landscape on a continent soaked with blood. It was a history of waves, of plague without cure, and ever-returning religious wars in which countless people died. Women were regularly burned alive as suspected witches, men thrown chained into dungeons for writing a pamphlet. Small wonder that no era in history wrote more or more passionately about the problem of evil. Into this landscape, she says, the Enlightenment introduced the very idea of humanity. Into this landscape, the Enlightenment introduced the very idea of humanity. Prior to this, the dominant belief was in us versus them. Our tribe, our kingdom, our religion, our beliefs versus everyone else, the others, the outsiders, the evil ones. Prior to the European Renaissance, its people only thought and spoke in Orthodox Christian terms. Any other way of seeing the world was considered heresy and was strictly forbidden, often punishable by torture and death. But at the very start of the Renaissance, as people began questioning church dogma, openly questioning it, Francesco Petrarch, born in 1304 CE, just before the Renaissance began, who became known as the father of humanism because he emphasized the studio humanitatis, studying all the works of humanity, not just one group's. As Neiman says, Enlightenment thinkers insisted that everyone, whether Christian or Confucian, Parisian or Persian, is endowed with innate dignity and demands respect. That's what a belief in humanity leads to. That's logical. That exists in contrast to our instincts. So this is what led to the Enlightenment philosopher Immanuel Kant, his categorical moral imperative that no person should be considered a means to another's ends, but should be considered an end within themselves. Clumsy way to say it, but that's how Kant did it. Kant's argument that a ruler's authority rests on his unification of the people's collective will into his own, that's also awkwardly said, but basically says that a ruler should consider what his people want, the will of his own people. And this is what eventually resulted in the idea of democracy, and to human rights, and to individual worth and dignity. In modern times, it was this belief, as expressed in the U.S. Constitution, that all men, by which I mean mankind or humankind, which is what the Constitution means too, all men are created equal and are born merely by being human with inalienable rights. Everyone, by being part of humanity, is born with inalienable rights. That inspired the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights after World War II and fueled the civil rights movement in the U.S. and gave hope and courage to reformers like Martin Luther King Jr. And it is why we have continued to widen our circles of inclusion to those who have been on the margins, most recently to gays and lesbians. And it is why we know we must continue to broaden our awareness of our brotherhood and our sisterhood to every person on the planet. Still, even knowing all this and believing in it and aspiring to make it a reality in my own life, I was struck by Neiman's particular turn of phrase, that the Enlightenment introduced the very idea of humanity. The Enlightenment began just 350 years ago. Even the fundamentalists believe we got here 6,000 years ago. That modern humans have been on Earth for 200,000 years or more. Sorry to disappoint them. Yet it was only then, such a short time ago, that we first began to understand that all people belong to one humanity. That we are all related, that we are all brothers and sisters. caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, as Dr. King said, tied in a single garment of destiny. There's a pattern here that is as remarkable as it should be obvious. That the solution to conflict and injustice is the discovery or rediscovery of humanity. The violence and brutality in the Dark Ages only resulted in unspeakable suffering and misery. Right? Forcing everybody to think the same and speak the same and be the same only resulted in unspeakable suffering and misery. Unending. There needed to be a better way of resolving differences. But the days of forcing everyone to share one idea were over, thanks to the social media of the day. Instead of one mind and one voice, people needed to recognize their shared humanity, and because everyone is fundamentally alike, everyone deserves to be treated as equals, which at a bare minimum meant tolerating their differences. Tolerating our many differences. That was the new plan. That was the logical consequence of accepting our common humanity. The same thing occurred again in the U.S. following a series of brutal wars, the Civil War, World War I, World War II. War wasn't working. War wasn't working, not even after inventing nuclear weapons. In fact, it only made the threat worse. Instead of more war, some hoped to end all wars by establishing a United Nations, by bringing the human family closer together, which immediately in 1948 created the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in recognition, once again, of our common humanity. Its preamble begins by acknowledging the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family in the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. The inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. That's a very different solution than taking up arms against each other and forcing everyone to think and speak and look alike. And Dr. King also used this common humanity ethic in his appeal for civil rights in ending some of the worst impacts of racism, continuing impacts of racism in the U.S. He wrote the words I cited earlier while locked up in the Birmingham jail. And here's a bit more context. I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere in this country. King was struggling to bring a divided nation together by appealing to the greater sense of our common humanity. But he also understood humanity often has trouble fulfilling its highest aspirations, and calling upon this nation to make justice a reality for all God's children. He was only asking that we fulfill the promise encoded in its own Constitution and Declaration of Independence by guaranteeing the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness to everyone. Today, I need turn only to the news of the wars in the Middle East and Eastern Europe to point out that we still have not learned this great lesson. That we are all part of one human family and therefore deserve to be treated with respect and dignity and to live peacefully without having bombs dropped on our community, no matter our differences. I refer to ours as an age of endarkenment for this very reason, because intolerance has become so widespread. As with the printing press in the Middle Ages, social media has vastly democratized communication. And so much so that we're all trapped in a chaotic cacophony of conversations, all happening at once, constantly drowning each other out, even as each voice struggles for dominance. As a result, many of us, too many of us, are reverting to our tribal instinct to destroy those who hold ideas we disagree with. Those we feel are a threat to our safety, to our own instinctive feelings projected outward as objective truths. If we can't arrest them or take away their lives today, we'll discredit them on social media with ad hominem attacks and take away their livelihoods. But I wonder if, and I hope that, all of this intolerance, injustice, and violence is a precursor of what must inevitably follow. Or at least what history has shown inevitably follows. The recognition that it isn't working. This violence and intolerance isn't working. That all voices and ideas will continue no matter what. And that the only way to establish peace isn't through groupthink and force, but through the tolerance that comes after we acknowledge the great truth of our common humanity. This can occur again, as it did 350 years ago, as people grow weary of the discord and the unrest, and more of them begin using social media, just as the Enlightenment pamphleteers did, or used the printing press anyway, to begin calling for tolerance rather than vying for dominance. So I call upon everyone who might be listening, whether you cling to liberal or conservative ideas, whichever makes you feel safest, whether you vote for Republicans or Democrats, whichever makes you feel safest, whether you produce a podcast in your basement or write articles on Substack, whether you write letters to your local editor or are a columnist for a major paper, whether you like to blog or express yourself on Facebook or X, whether you are a pundit on Fox News or MSNBC, or occasionally join a group or club to discuss the world's problems. Please use your voice, your power, your passion to help reintroduce all of us to humanity. That's the solution. For if the notion of us versus them is the great untruth, the great truth is that violence and injustice and war is always a matter of us versus us. Us against ourselves. Putin is fighting himself. Israel and Hamas are fighting themselves. Social media trolls are canceling themselves. As the Buddhist saying goes, every murder is a suicide. If, like me, you are weary of this miserable and futile gridlock approach to society. Let's work together to create a world of us for us instead. As we step now into the promise of a new year, let's remember that our common humanity is the only means of establishing peace on earth and goodwill to all. May it be a happy and peaceful new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stand for the last hymn, Auld Lang Syne. Insert in your order of service. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne. We too have run about the slopes and picked the daisies fine. We've wandered many a weary foot since days of old lang syne. For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne. We too have paddled in the stream from morning sun till dawn, but seas between us broad have roared since old lang syne. For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne. For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne.
It's a lovely thing to turn away from busy work and to pay attention to our loved ones and loved things. We know how we wait to be told how important we are. We should never wait to say or think something beautiful that will make someone's day easier and more secure. Joy Suquichi Hifler. Amen, blessed be, salam alaikum, and shalom.
Shalom.